right, welcome back to 6 Degrees of Associations. Today, we are super excited to be joined by the CEO of the American Physical Therapy Association, Justin Moore. Welcome to the show as a first-time guest. I am super excited to have you on.
Great. Looking forward to it, Casey.
Awesome. And just a little bit of pre-recording chat that we had. You had mentioned that you are not from the Beltway area originally. Of course, your association APTA is within the that region. So what brought you to the area? What brought you to associations? Let's just kind of start there.
Yeah, well, I had a little bit of an unconventional path, or at least I consider it an unconventional path, is I am actually a member of the profession I represent. So I'm a physical therapist by background, and my introduction to associations was I got involved right after I graduated from PT school and was involved in legislative issues in the state of Michigan. And at that time, started getting more involved locally with the APTA Michigan and the state government affairs and federal government affairs efforts that were going on at the association. And so pretty early in my career, there was an opportunity to come to APTA for a short-term project in state government affairs. And I was at a point in my career that I could take that chance and that risk and join the association for what I thought was going to be 6 months to a year to help the association on that legislative issue. That turned into now a whole career path that I followed through and been at the association for 25 years now. And so 6 months to 25 years was a big jump.
Yeah, that is amazing. How many years in the field as a PT were you like kind of full time, so to speak, before you made got involved on the legislative end of things?
I'd practiced for just under 2 years. So it was very early in my career. And the opportunity was for a new professional. And it was to learn how the association worked and how to help provide a clinician's perspective on a government affairs issue. So it was just sort of a good timing and a good confluence of different situations that allowed me at that point in my career to take that opportunity, that chance. And it was, at the time, pretty risky for the association. So I really appreciated that APTA took that risk on one of its members, and I was able to, work with the association for that that short time, and then really develop a passion for public policy, lobbying, and government affairs, which has really been the core of my association career.
So we hear a lot of times on this podcast, people fall into the association space unintentionally.
Mhm.
That is not the case here, and I am super excited to learn more about that. Was there something when you were in the field as a professional in your industry that we'll say irked you the wrong way, and you decided, hey, I need to get involved on the legislative end of things to make a change? Like, what sparked that?
Yeah, when I entered practice, there was a pretty significant gap on how physical therapists were educated and the qualifications we had as healthcare professionals and what the Practice Acts allowed us to do. And so we were not able to practice to the full extent of our training and education, and we're very restricted due to antiquated laws and regulations in state practice acts and under federal policies as well. So that really sparked early in me, how can I help the profession change that so that we can be our full potential for our patients, for our communities, and actually serve the greater healthcare system. And that gap was significant in Michigan. When I grew up in Iowa and practiced in Iowa, we had direct access, which allowed PTs to practice without a referral in the state of Iowa. And I was qualified to do that as a new grad in Iowa. But when I moved to Michigan, I was no longer qualified to do that. And so I got very involved early on in Michigan of trying to change that law in the state legislature, and just really trying to close that gap between how we were educated and trained and where we were competent and qualified to how we are actually kind of controlled by the healthcare system.
And when you were in training, did you have any thought that this would become your reality? Or was that part of your journey kind of accidental, so to speak? Like, did you ever have intentions of this kind of leadership on the legislative end?
I don't know if it was intentional, but I did have a unique combination of an interest in healthcare, which led me to physical therapy and the opportunity to help patients and make a difference in people's lives. And then I also had an interest in politics. So I grew up around politics, and I had a couple different opportunities while I was in PT school that really helped connect those dots between a profession and the importance of public policy. The first experience was I was a maternal child health grantee, which allowed me to participate in a program that really was focused around advocacy and care for individuals with disabilities. And part of that granteeship that we spent time going to the state capitol to lobby. So as a student physical therapist, I was in Des Moines at the state legislature lobbying on Medicaid issues and issues for respite care for families who have individuals with or children with disabilities. The second was between my undergraduate and graduate degrees, I had a summer off and decided at the time to come to Washington, D.C. and intern on Capitol Hill. And really, with no intentions that that would be a permanent career path. But I thought my interest in politics would be a great summer to spend in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill. It happened to be in 1994, to date myself, and the hot issue was the Clinton Healthcare Reform Act. And so it was a way for me at that time to say I could go to Capitol Hill and be there the summer that they were debating healthcare reform. The reality was healthcare reform was over before I got here. And so I ended up just getting a great experience in a senator's office of understanding the process of legislation, constituency service, and really the inner workings of government. And so those two things really sort of set me up to always kind of combine my interest in public policy with an interest in the profession. And I've been able to do that through the association.
Great. And there seems like there was a lot of need for change in your industry as you saw it, at least at the time when you initially started getting involved in these public policy issues. Do you think that, there has been that change over the years? And I know that with public policy, change is like, moving a mountain, and it can be frustrating and tough. And, that's a big part of your job, I'm sure. So talk to me about what you've seen change or what you're still, trying to get done here.
Yeah, the profession has drastically changed since I entered the profession, and mostly through public policy change. So physical therapists now practice in all 50 states independently, and so there's no referral. So consumers can come directly to a physical therapist to partner to manage their health care. And physical therapy's public recognition is a lot stronger. And when I started lobbying on Capitol Hill, my main focus was to explain to legislators what physical therapists were and what we did. And now almost every legislator has experience with physical therapy. So they know who we are. We now have to sort of tell them the problems we're experiencing from a public policy standpoint. We're not spending so much time explaining what physical therapy is or who physical therapists are. So we've seen that growth in our recognition as a healthcare profession. We've seen that growth in our recognition as to the public. And now we're seeing just huge opportunity for PTs practicing in different ways. And so PTs are now, treating patients post-cancer diagnoses. So it's not just sports and orthopedics. We're seeing women's and pelvic health physical therapy. And then we're obviously a big part of helping solve the long COVID situation and people who've been, having symptoms, the post-COVID diagnoses or positive tests, and helping them regaining their strength, their endurance, their flexibility. So we've really seen a growth of the profession, and we're now the fifth largest healthcare provider in the United States. Obviously nurses are the biggest, physicians are number two, and we have a very large group of members now that allow us to really have a greater impact on patients and communities.
What kind of advantages do you think you're at where you are a member of the constituency that you serve? That is who you are as a PT by trade. Like, because that's not obviously, as we know, often the case in the association space. People that are in the executive director positions are not necessarily of that association by trade. So talk to me first about some of the advantages that maybe aren't so obvious that you have in that position.
Yeah, the biggest advantage I saw was when I was actually the lobbyist for the association. And when I was talking to legislators about issues that affected the profession, being a member of the profession really gave me a level of credibility and a level of authenticity to that audience. And so I saw a huge advantage being a physical therapist as the lobbyist for the American Physical Therapy Association. So that was probably the first advantage. I think the other advantage is it does give me credibility in a relationship with our members. And so I was a member. Being able to connect, knowing where they practice, how they practice, gives me a great understanding of the industry and some credibility. And I found that most recently, it's really allowed me to speak with emerging leaders as the industry's changed. We've gone through a pretty big swing of private equity backed companies in the physical therapy space that don't always come with the industry knowledge. And being able to speak with them on industry trends has become an advantage for me in the role as an association leader in connecting this business side of the profession with the professional side of the association and bridging those two together. The biggest disadvantage, I know you didn't ask that, but the biggest disadvantage is I was really dependent on the association community to learn the business of associations. And so I came with a lot less experience, a lot less exposure to association leadership and management as a field. And so my dependency on ASAE, my dependency on peer leaders that had already been in the seats that I was now occupying was incredibly important. And I had to sort of recognize with a little bit of humility and a little bit of ability of asking the dumb question, really leaning on that network of other association leaders to help me on that side of the business. So I understood the industry. I was probably a little bit weaker on understanding associations.
Yeah, and it sounds like you were probably able to get caught up to speed on at least understanding a little bit more about the business of associations. How about management and leadership? Those skills, was that something you brought to the table before coming to this association in formal leadership roles, or was that something you had to get caught up to speed a little bit on as well?
Probably a little bit of both. I grew up in sports, and I think sports has a natural tendency to teach leadership, teamwork, and so growing up in a small town in Iowa, I had an opportunity to at times just be a member of a sports team, and at times have to lead those sports teams. And then just being in a small community, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of leadership opportunities from running clubs to running community service activities. So I think that small town upbringing gave me some inclinations toward leadership and helped me have mentors toward leadership. But it was also a skills gap I needed to close. PTs practice individually. I was a wrestler, which is an individual sport. And so I had to learn how to really the concept of building teams, fostering teams, supporting teams was not a natural skill set for me. I was used to, going out and doing it myself. And so that's been a big transition for me, especially as I've had to lead a bigger and bigger team, is how do I really, build the right team? How do I foster their growth and development? And how do I leverage their strengths and skills as well? I'm still learning that part of the job. Even though I think that's probably my biggest challenge every day is how do I continually learn how to invest in others and learn how to foster their growth as much as I learn how to foster my growth as well.
Okay, so you're from Iowa and you are a wrestler background. That for those that follow amateur wrestling, that is not surprising. That Iowa, Oklahoma tend to be, where the hotbed of the sport is, and it is an amazing sport and teaches so much. I was a part of it as well at a young age, and I can't. I mean, I think there's so much that you talked about the downside of being an individual athlete, an individual sport athlete. Be it a tennis player, a wrestler, a boxer. So, like, I know the downside of that is you're relying on yourself. But talk to me about the advantages that wrestling did teach you as an individual sport, and being a self starter and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the biggest skill set I learned from wrestling was discipline. No one, you have to put in the time and the effort yourself, and so it's just that constant sort of grit, discipline. The sport sort of brings that out in you, and so that self reliance. And so I think those are the biggest skill sets that I learned through wrestling, and I still have a lot of those habits. I'm a runner, and I'm pretty consistent about it because I used to have to do it to cut weight. Now I have to do it to just stay healthy, and so that's probably the biggest skill. I think it also teaches you a little bit of humility And it doesn't matter how good you are in that sport. Um, you're going to find yourself on your back, or you're going to find yourself in a position you don't want to be in, and you gotta navigate that. And so I think that that's an important skill set. And then last, and I think it's an underappreciated element of the sport, is strategy. There's an enormous amount of strategy that obviously we use as association leaders, but that problem solving, thinking on your feet, and being able to adjust to a situation are just so embedded in the sport that you have to be able to strategize quickly and make adjustments quickly. And I think I got some of the at least some of the foundations of those traits through years of wrestling and the discipline it took to prepare to wrestle.
Talk to me a little bit about the size of your membership base and that type of thing, just so our listeners can have at least a foundational understanding of how big an association we're talking here.
Yeah, we're an individual membership association. We have a little over 100,000 active members today. And so that represents about a third of the market. And so about 250,000 physical therapists in the United States today. And then there's also physical therapist assistants, which are a very important part of our profession, and probably another 150 to 180,000 physical therapist assistants. So combined, we're just 450,000 practitioners, both regulated. PTAs are regulated at the state level. PTs are licensed, and so those individual members are the corpus of our membership base. And we're also, it's an international field, and so we're also, the second largest member organization to Japan is the biggest in the world body of physical therapy called World Physiotherapy.
Got it. Mentioning there are a few, we'll say, PTs out there that aren't members. What is the, talk to a physical therapist that's out there, in the middle of the grind working, and they're not a member. What's the value add there? How are we convincing them to come on over?
Yeah, I think our secret sauce at APTA is our advocacy strength. We're a federated model, so we're not only the national APTA, we're the 51 state chapters, including DC. And the amount of legislative advocacy that we can really achieve through that common voice and that common network is our strength. And so all PTs benefit by the advocacy efforts that the third that join APTA contribute. And so that's the biggest thing. And that's tough because everyone benefits by our efforts. And, but that's our secret sauce. The second thing, and what we hear often from our members, is when they get inside of APTA, their ability to connect with their community and their people has career development, career opportunities that they'll never find anywhere else. So it's where they find their next boss. It's where they find the career path that they didn't expect. Some of them go on to be hospital CEOs. We have a brigadier general in the U.S. Army. We have a PT does sports injuries on ESPN. All those are members, and you can find those individuals that really help shape a career path beyond the first clinical job you have in physical therapy. So I'd say that's sort of our 1-2 is that advocacy strength, and in that sense of finding your people, building community, and then obviously we're the standard setting body for the organization as well. So we're constantly pushing forward to make sure that our standards continue to deliver quality care to the people we serve.
I mean, you want to have a voice. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the main thing. If you're passionate about this field, you want to make sure the future of it is in good hands. And
Yep.
the track record of your advocacy work, I'm someone that's a consumer of physical therapy. So, I mean, so many of us are, and at a younger and younger ages, you'll probably see it. And I'm curious, how do you get the word out about all those advocacy successes that you've had? I mean, I had no idea that as a consumer of PT that's what the landscape was previously. That you couldn't just freedom of choice pick your own PT clinic. I like Joey down the street. He's awesome and he's going to rehab my lacrosse injuries, etc. I didn't know that was the case. How do you get the word out that you've made that difference to the younger folk that might not be aware of that?
Quite frankly, that's probably our biggest challenge is how do we I've had a couple mentors and people who've been involved in the association and have talked about we sometimes are the best kept secret in healthcare. And so we have to do a better job of figuring out how to communicate and resonate with younger consumers. And we know this younger consumers are taking more of an active role in their healthcare decisions, and that aligns with who we are as a profession. So, how do we interact and engage with them to show the value of the association and the value of the profession? And frankly, that's probably our biggest gap we have at APTA is, we're a legacy association, 104 years old, and used to be sort of that standard magazine, journal. That was the communication vehicles of getting the evidence and the news out. Those are instant today. And we have to be quicker. We have to be on multiple channels. And we have to really be able to leverage new media in new ways. And we have not been as quick to adapt to this new media world as we would have hoped. And so that's kind of a big focus of our board of directors and a big focus of the organization is how do we really tell people what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the results we're going to have when we have this collective community behind the profession.
And there's a lot of bright people that go into this field. I can attest to that directly. And these people have big ambitions. And Justin Moore, you've found a way to make find your niche and make a big splash in this field, and influence it pretty heavily. Do you have advice for the young, aspiring PT out there that, might be looking to do the same and have a fulfilling career? What other kind of ways can they go about it? What would you encourage or what words would you have for a young aspiring PT?
Well, I actually think the most encouraging word I would have is something that we know across the whole association community is just the power that associations have regardless of the profession in the industry. And so for young professionals, I really encourage them to find their local group to be involved with, even if it's not APTA. Find an association, find a network where you can really find mentors, coaches, sponsors to help you identify your career strengths and how to navigate those to have the impact you want to have. One of the most exciting things about this profession is you can do 100 different things with it. You can be, the PT for a sports team. You can own your own business, and you can have a podcast. We have multiple PTs who are providing healthcare advice to consumers through new media. You can write a book. We have a New York Times bestseller. There's just a lot of different ways that PTs can try to practice their profession, and seeing patients is one way, but there's healthcare leadership opportunities, there's business opportunities, and there's just education opportunities abound. So it's really, boiling down what your interests are and then finding people who can help you navigate that local community, that larger community inside associations. And I always say PTs have two things, besides the clinical knowledge that they get through anatomy, physiology, they are really good problem solvers because patients, one patient is one patient. You don't see the same patient twice. So you're constantly having to problem solve. And you're also constantly have to observe how people interact with their community. So how they move in their community. So those powers of observation and problem solving are really transferable into many different fields. I constantly reminded when I was lobbying how many times I'd go back and say, okay, what's the diagnosis of this issue? What's the prognosis of this issue? How do we create a treatment plan to get from A to B? Those were skills I learned in the clinic that I started applying to legislative issues when I was a lobbyist.
That is interesting. That is really cool. The way your brain starts functioning will help you in other disciplines. That's fascinating. Justin Moore has been our guest today. He is the CEO of the APTA. Just a fantastic talent to have in the association industry, and it's been great spending better half of an hour here talking with you. Is there anyone in your community or in your network, in the spirit of 6 Degrees of Associations, we always like to have a guest sponsor a guest, if nothing more, to give them a public tip of the cap. Is there anyone in the association space that you've come across that you really think that we ought to have on here and learn from as well?
Well, a couple people that came to mind is, there's a new CEO at our partner and partner organization, the American Occupational Therapy Association. She's been a CEO. It's her first time being a CEO, but she comes from the profession. So I have a natural affinity for her coming from the profession into the CEO seat. And her name's Katie Jordan. And she's a very established clinician educator from the occupational therapy world who's now, been a CEO for a few months now. And I already, just in my short time of getting to know Katie, impressed with what she's going to bring to the whole rehabilitation field and to into the partnership between AOTA and APTA. But two others that I give you names for is two individuals that I had great respect for because I was a lobbyist with them and saw how effective they were as lobbyists, who then transitioned into the CEO seat is Sean Martin at the American Academy of Family Physicians. Sean is probably the best lobbyist I ever observed. He was a fantastic advocate for, at the time, the osteopathic medicine physicians, DOs, and now has, in a long time, been at the family practice and just a fabulous lobbyist, but also a fabulous leader. So I'm very impressed with Sean. And then Bill Perennis, who's at the ambulatory surgery centers. And Bill is another lobbyist who I knew from my lobby days. And I've always been intrigued by these fantastic lobbyists that Bill and Sean were and how they've transitioned to organizational leaders.
This has been awesome. The physical therapy community is certainly in good hands, and we are so excited to have had a chance to chat with you, Justin. Thank you so much for making time for us today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure, Casey.